And welcome to Pitch Point by Media 3. I'm your host Max and co-founder of AdaMoments.io, the Infinite Museum on Cardano. Check it out. Today, we are interviewing Gabriel from ArpRadio, who has a proposal on Project Catalyst in order to standardize the tokenization of music. So let's listen in on how he's going to change the music industry. Hi, everybody. This is a short, no-nonsense format where we give 2 minutes of a pitch followed by 10 minutes of Q&A. Today, we have Gabriel, author of the Catalyst proposal about tokenizing music on Cardano, and also the project lead of ArpRadio. Take it away, Gabriel. Looking forward to hear.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Gabriel Talamontes. I am an audio professional. I've been doing music-related things for about 15 years. One of the first things that blockchain made me realize is that we have an opportunity to create new tooling and opportunities for musicians and users to have a more fair system. And a lot of our efforts within ArpRadio and a bunch of the community that we've gathered has been about making and realizing that reality. So currently on Cardano, we do have CIP-60, which is the metadata standard for music tokens. This outlines all the needed fields within the tokenization of music. So that contains ISRC codes, things of that nature. And the music industry is a rights-centric industry, which in the past, resulted into the centralization of power and labels, limited the control of artists over the works that they created. So we are trying to create a paradigm where artists maintain their ownership. The profits go to the artists and it reduces the friction of the end user. So the music metadata standard, again, it outlines all the data that goes into musical works. The main use case of this framework is to actually create the framework that dApps can be built on top of. We are proposing is tooling within Catalyst that will basically create solutions to these issues, which currently there is no enforcement mechanism on Cardano abide by these standards. So creating the tooling that will make this a lot easier to do so. I realize right now this is going well over 2 minutes, man.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah, just try to keep it a bit short so that we have some time for questions. But no worries. If you're going to go over, it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there is a lack of enforcement mechanisms for people to abide by the CIP. Currently, it's an opt-in standard. So the tooling that we are proposing will basically introduce a feature set that benefits the artists to use it. And by using that, they can now take advantage of all of the tooling's features. The main component of this is automating the generation of CIP-60 compliant JSON data, which is the standard in which metadata follows. This will increase the amount of compliant CIP-60 tokens. Will also provide tools that can integrate into existing minting platforms, so they can also create CIP-60 compliant tokens. And then new music platforms that are looking at creating minting tooling can easily adopt this tooling and be compliant as well. We are also proposing validation tooling that allows songs to be cross-validated against existing song libraries. This prevents people from uploading songs that they don't own. Nobody's going to take Michael Jackson Thriller song, mint a token, and try to earn all those profits. There's also going to be a mechanism for discovering cover songs, which overall adds to the legitimacy of the music industry on Web3 in general. Also going to be an aspect where we can then get those tokens onto those databases, which then increases the discoverability of those tokens on outside of the Web3 industry. So the reason we're qualified for this is a bunch of the team members were authors on the CIP-60 version 3. In the current ecosystem, we have members that are a part of the Juke Boys and Six City Epoch releases. I myself have designed ArpRadio, which is the music token index player. Um, been within the Cardano community for quite a few years, and combined, we have about 30 years of industry experience. Our main milestones are developing the CIP-60 compliant JSON generators and integrating with the song fingerprinting APIs. Next step would be to integrate with the database submissions into the outside databases, and then our final testing and application integration. We have a list of our team members here. We've already have a team assembled that are quite capable of realizing what we're doing here.
Okay. Super. Yeah, it's a bit fine to read here, but I think maybe that's a nice point to leap off into some questions. So I think one of the main points that you made there was in enforcement, which I find quite interesting. So what do you mean by that in enforcing the CIP on the open blockchain of Cardano, right?
Right. Well, you just nailed the nail right on the head, right? It is an open and permissionless blockchain. So there really is no enforcement mechanism. The SIP has been out there. There was 2 previous versions before the version that I had revised. And one thing I was realizing in creating ArpRadio, which was indexing these tokens, is that the standard wasn't consistent. So having to build around multiple implementations of the existing SIPs was
Yeah.
was a huge obstacle in the development. So instead of enforcing it, essentially what we want to do is explain that abiding by the standard is at the artist and user's best interest.
Right.
Instead of
Right.
saying you must follow this, it's offering enough tooling and enough advantages so that doing so offers them a lot more than by not.
So just for people that might not understand, it's about how the token that represents the song is structured, right? So in the same way that anybody has a Word document that they structure with a title first and a footer and a header, and we all agree, yes, that is the way by which we read Word documents. In that same sense, you have music tokens, and in order for there to be consensus on how do we read such music tokens, it needs to follow a certain structure, right? And that's the crux here, is that there were multiple tokens on the blockchain that were using different structures by which they try to represent music and the associated rights. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, one of the things that might come up then is if when you're trying to define the CIP and the structure, how do you work with different jurisdictions, for example? Is there anything you can say about that? Are there global standards that you try to follow, or how do you?
Most of the identifiers are globally, they're internationally recognized things. Really, it's kind of ironic, but the US is one of the main outliers in that. Uh, One of the most common identifiers for the actual authorship, a lot of industries use the IPN number. In the
Okay.
United States, they do not use the IPN number, there's the IPI. So the standard actually accommodates for either of those identifiers to be used. Again, your jurisdiction will dictate that. When you're
Yeah.
registering these works, these would be identifiers that you already have. So, the standard will pretty much outline where those fields go in the metadata, but you yourself will have all of that information that needs to go into the song. So the forms that we would have are just essentially, name, song title, things of that nature. So instead of the person needing to understand the technical nature of the SIP and all of the different fields, only the required fields will be outlined. And of course, whether you have the US facing IPI number or the more international recognized IPN number, the standard
Right.
accommodates for both of those.
So for the musicians here in the audience that already have music that they've brought out, right? and this is then registered music, so they will have these IPI numbers, for example, and then that gives them the right to tokenize these assets, right? Is that, roughly speaking, the right way in
That's
which this
a
is
fair
used?
generalization. Yes.
Yeah, okay. And for these artists, what are the types of tooling? Because you mentioned a couple times there's tooling required in order to make this process as painless as possible and to empower the artists. So what are the types of tooling that you're working on?
Really, it's a lot of web forms, and just things that will automatically format the data there. Because the SIP standard, essentially, everyone knows the song title, everyone knows um, the contributors to the song. Now, where that goes and how to
Actually, I
structure that
searched
data.
the Rolling Stone songs by their IPI number. That's how I always Google.
Right. Well, so see, that is going to be more of a developer facing thing, and this is enabling uh, in the future things like streaming royalty apps to be built, indexers, so you could search not only by the album artist, but if you know the songwriter that you like and you want to search for every song that he has contributed on, you can search by his name. Now, the IPI number is not really included only for the royalty collection, but it's a unique identifier. So when you have people that share similar names, you can
Mhm.
pinpoint to a specific person, right? So you have the WHO US and the WHO, of all the different jurisdictions, you can actually now pinpoint which exact entity you're searching by their unique identifier. So there's a
Yeah.
few other indexing options
Okay.
that can be leveraged from those identifiers as well.
Okay. Okay. That's great. Yeah. The Who is a good example there. And in, your example that you gave about, if somebody does a cover song versus if they're uploading Michael Jackson, how do you establish that idea of sufficiently differentiated music? Is there some API in the background that checks that? How are those checks performed in a way that everybody can trust or that can be verified? Is there anything you can share about that?
Yes. So, nothing's 100% right. So, we do have dependencies on external libraries. The completeness of those libraries is going to be as basically the limitation of how widespread the validation aspect will be. That
Yeah.
being said, there's a lot of underlying tech, kind of like Shazam and SoundHound, what they use. There's a API, ARC Cloud. The beautiful thing about that is it has external database connections, but you can also check against an existing database that's a custom database. So we can have a repertory of the songs released on Cardano that may not be included in the external libraries and still check against those. Now, again, this isn't something that would prevent people from minting tokens, but this would be tooling that would enable marketplaces to validate submissions. So you could have a validated badge on the marketplace. So only
Mm.
validated tokens can be listed or things like that. It's again, it's an open permissionless system. So anyone can pretty much mint anything, but providing tooling that can add an extra layer of validation ultimately just adds more legitimacy to the project and the music ecosystem on Web3 as a whole.
And to get a little bit into your development and the milestones of the project, yeah, can you talk a little bit about how these different milestones and what they're, well, how they're structured and their impact that they will have on the growth of Cardano as an ecosystem?
So the first phase of what we're doing is literally going to be the form generation. Now, there are multiple cases of how songs can be uploaded and tokenized. You can have um, EPs, albums, single releases, compilations.
Hmm.
So essentially designing a front end that can cover all of those different scenarios within the transaction limits that Cardano has, right? You can't add an infinite amount of information per transaction. So creatively organizing the data in a way that fits in with the token, with the transaction limits on Cardano is one of our challenges. That being said, that front end generation of covering all the different scenarios that might come up on music tokenization, that would be step number one. On ArpRadio, we currently have single song submissions where the user can basically mint a CIP-60 compliant token already. Granted, that's one use case. There's a billion other that we have to accommodate for. So that's one of our first challenges is covering a bunch of different scenarios there. Once that is done, the next aspects of that is connecting to our external APIs. So this is cross-referencing against existing databases, the ARC validation checking that we mentioned before. So setting up API endpoints so developers can have access to those APIs and then develop their own databases. So things that might not be included within those external databases can still be cross-referenced. Then our final challenge from that is just integrating this tooling within different applications, so different frameworks, different programming languages that are present in the web development world.
Okay. All right. I mean, it sounds like if this were done right, then it would make it a lot more interesting for many musical artists to get onboarded on Cardano and help accelerate that. So is that, on the final question here, is how do you see the successful deployment of CIP-60? So basically, the effective tokenization of music on Cardano. How is this going to have an impact? How do you foresee projects, people using this as a way to onboard the next generation of content creators?
That is a huge point, right? I see in this industry, we tend to be very siloed within our communities. And speaking on Cardano for one, and then the music community within Cardano is another subsection of that. So having ways of branching beyond that. Currently, there's probably only a handful of blockchains that have music standards even implemented. And so this is a huge opportunity for Cardano to be a leader in a very nuanced standard. Um, Now, in my opinion, this SIP, it works very well as an analog and a supplementary method of copyright registration. So uh, that's at least here in the States, in the United States, it's a very long process. The application itself isn't a guarantee that you're granted the copyright registration. And, time is of the essence. In the interim time, litigation can come up. Now you don't have the tools to leverage that you actually authored the works you have in question. So providing that means is a very faster way to do something that the industry currently has. To me, this is an attractive means of bringing people that aren't already on Web3 into here. So this is essentially giving Cardano a huge opportunity to attract just musicians from the world economy in general. And this tooling, reducing that friction of on-ramping is a huge step in making sure that
Okay.
they do find those pathways easy.
Super. Gabriel, thanks so much for coming on the show. Where can people reach you if they want to hear more, if they want to follow you along on this journey of the tokenizing music on Cardano?
So very present on X, on Twitter. You can find me as the pseudo scientist, SUDO_scientist. That's my alias there. ArpRadio also has a page there. So if you search ArpRadio Web3, we should pull up there. So most up to date would be on X.
Okay, super. Okay, thanks so much for joining, Gabriel.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Cheers.